Alrighty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. I serve entrepreneurs around the world in protecting their online and offline businesses. Today, I am so excited to welcome you to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. We have got my new friend and Sanger. I'm so excited that we had a few minutes to chat before we get started here. But Sanger Smith, who is a financial guru based out of Texas. We've been talking about some projects, a lot of fun things going on in his life right now, and we've got a fun conversation in store today. So for those of you who don't know Sanger, as a high school student, Sanger began his first job at Clear Fork Wealth Management, a nationally ranked financial advisory practice. It was clear from the start that he was a natural in the field, but he worked hard to learn all of the ins and outs of the industry. Celebrating 10 years this year with Clear Fork Wealth Management, Sanger is now a managing partner at a firm that manages $500 million. Sanger, I know there's a lot more to you than that. I mentioned you live in Texas. You help business owners and entrepreneurs make better financial decisions and investments in their life. And I'm super excited to dig in into all the ins and outs of how you do that, what drives you in this work, and what you really care about. So share with us, how did you get started? How did you get an interest in the financial world?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on, Heather. That's a great question. Whenever I meet with prospects, that's a question I feel like obligated to answer because this is such a boring career. I tell people that all the time. Like my job, you got to be a nerd to want to do this. Right? Oh, I want to, cook up some numbers and the cook up sounds bad, but I want to, look at numbers all day and help people with their money. It's not fun, or exciting, right? We like it and we're passionate about it once we get into it, but you got to be a nerd to want to do it. So I started working when I was 15 for my dad, who's a financial advisor. And really, I wasn't doing anything of any substance, right? I'm scanning files. But during that time, I'm learning, hey, what's a mutual fund? How do stocks work? All these things. And I hated it. I really hated it. I thought you got to wear a jacket to work. You got to be professional. You got to talk to people the right way about these very boring topics, handling their money. That's super important. And I could, that's a high stress. Well, then an old hunting rifle made me realize that I had to be an advisor. So my granddad, Heather, was this. If you've ever been to Texas on a road trip and stopped by at a gas station in the middle of the Dust Bowl, that my granddad was every guy walking around that gas station. I mean, he had a pearl snap shirt every single time I ever saw him, big bushy mustache, real cowboy guy, right? So he loved to go hunting, and so did I, but we never got to go hunting together because he was in and out of the hospital for years and years and years. Anyway, ultimately, he passes away in April several years back. I think it was 17, 18. 7 months later, it's deer season in Texas, and I'm walking through this field out near Hyco with his old Remington 25-06 hanging on my shoulder. And so it's early in the morning, sun's not up yet, it's freezing butt cold, and I'm creeping through this field really, really slowly to get to my spot so I can hopefully see a beautiful deer this morning. And as I'm creeping real slowly, trying to not step on a branch, not making any noise, I smell out of nowhere this fire burning. I'm like, okay, what's going on? I look over to my left, I don't see any flames. I look out past the trees, there's no smoke. Look over to my right, and I start to realize it's his old cigarette smoke, right? Clinging to this leather strap of the rifle. So, of course, I realize I'm not going to sneak up on a 12-point buck smelling like Marlboros. So I pack everything up and I drive to the cemetery where he's buried in this small town. And when I get there, I realize that there's just a smooth pile of dirt on the spot where he was buried that I hadn't been to since that April. But there wasn't a headstone. And so in that moment, I learned that my granddad didn't have enough money to pay for a headstone. And so I called my mom. I said, why the heck does my granddad not have a headstone? I'm sure I was a lot more angry when I asked that question. I said, why the heck does he not have a headstone? And she says, I don't know. I don't know. And I said, well, why don't you pay for it? And she goes, well, I paid for his funeral. And she hung up the phone. So I realized he didn't have enough money to pay for his funeral either. And so that moment is what I reflect on when I realize that's why I have to show up every day and help people create a legacy that's more meaningful, more impactful, more long lasting, everything, just more than material goods. I mean, I love that rifle, right? But it could be so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, it's fascinating that story, that it just hit you, in that moment or sometime in that time frame, the impact of our choices that we make in this life, including the long lasting and far reaching financial choices that we make, right? Not only around our own legacy, but how we end up impacting others who are left once we're gone. And, like you, I can relate to being in an industry where it doesn't feel all that glamorous, or, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be a bit of a nerd to have chosen that industry in the first place. And, when I took a business law course in undergrad, and like, other people are literally falling asleep in that course, right? It was a mandatory course for our business program. And I'm like front row Joe, totally like enjoying what it is that I'm learning in that business law course. And anyways, long story short, I think, where I sit now, like you, the impact that I really feel that I have is around helping people build legitimate businesses that allow them to have influence in their life and allow them to do things through their business. And I really see entrepreneurship, business, you could also say finances, as one of the greatest opportunities that we have in life for the expression of good, right? For the expression of ourselves and for the expression of good and influence in the world. And so the mission is so much bigger, right? It's so much more than just looking at numbers. It's so much more than just being good with spreadsheets or planning, right? It really is like your core mission, I see, as really connected to people's purpose and their legacy and what they want to either be remembered for, or the way they want to influence other people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. And I love what you said, giving people the opportunity or empowering them to have influence or provide influence. That when we talk about legacy, influence, those things are so much bigger than money, right? I'm not showing up to work to help people have a bigger portfolio just for the sake of adding zeros to their bank account. What is the point of that? What is the point of that?
Right. Just like I'm not trying to help people build businesses, same thing, just so they have more money in their account. Like, it goes way beyond the paperwork and the documents that I put in place for them. And it's about helping them employ others, helping them get a message out into the world that changes lives, helping them do all of the things through their business that, help to raise, what is it? A rising tide lifts all boats, right? So, like you, it's not about sometimes what people think it's about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that we're both in industries where people approach us rightfully with a lot of skepticism, right? Oh, how many lawyer jokes have you heard? Right?
Oh my gosh, I can tell the few. Yeah, there's some of the only jokes I can actually remember. Yeah.
Right. Well, I can empathize with that as an advisor, because I think that we might be the two top industries for just I'm losing the words, but you know what I'm saying? People don't exactly trust every advisor that they meet. People don't exactly trust every lawyer that they meet. And sure, there's a lot of people that are not motivated by those things in both industries, right? People are motivated by money
Yeah.
wherever you go. But I think you have to really be successful and have fulfillment. You have to have something that is more impactful that you're fighting for, a deeper reason to continue to show up and do the boring paperwork that you have to do and look at the boring graphs that I have to look at, because it's not always fun and glamorous and exciting.
Yeah.
It's not it's not an adrenaline pumping job every single day. But if you're showing up and saying, okay, well, this work that I get to do is going to help my clients fulfill not only their goals, but fulfill their soul, their values. It's going to give them the opportunity to live a life that they want,
Yeah.
not just check boxes.
Right. Well, and I think anytime people, thoughtfully bring an advisor on board, it moves you out of the bucket of folks that are responding to life and like letting life happen to you, and moves you into the planning side where you get to be there with more intention. You get to create things in your life with a plan, with intention around it, and hopefully towards a bigger goal, right? So talk to us, who are your people that you really love to serve? Who is it that you primarily love to show up and work for every day in the course of your work?
Sure. Well, the technical answer would be my minimum is anybody that has over $500,000 of investable assets. So if they have less than $500,000, I'm not working with them. But I make an exception for 3 people every year, and these are actually my favorite people to work with. So 3 people each year that have less than $500,000. I don't care where they are. I don't care if they have $1. I don't care if they have 499,000. All that I want is to know that they're dedicated, they're advice receptive, I like them, they like me, and they're with it, right? They may not be there today, and of all ages, right? Of all ages, there are people in their 20s that are like, hey, I'm just starting, I don't know anything. There are people who are in their 50s that go, hey, I don't really meet your asset minimum, but I just want to change. Right? I really want to get on board with what you're doing. And those are, that's not exactly the formula for great monetary success, but for emotional fulfillment for me, those people pay me way more than I could ever get from any other client, because they show up with the best attitude, right? They show up with the best attitude. We get to work on things. I get the ability to work with them in a way that number one, I don't always get to do, because sometimes I'm working, we're just managing money. And that's how it takes a lot of work sometimes to get clients out of that mindset. But if I'm working with someone there's no money to manage,
You're educating them.
I'm getting to really, really, really talk about behavior, because that's the only thing we can talk about, right, is behavior. And that's really fun, right? Because to me, that's the artistry side of financial planning. The science side is investment. And if I had to pick, I'd rather be an artist than a scientist. I'm just not smart enough to be a scientist. So getting to work with those people, young business owners, young entrepreneurs, they're not cranking it out right now. They're not printing money, but they show up and they just say, hey man, I'm here to learn. I want to ride. And they probably call me 10 times more than the client that has $2 million. And I probably spend, so much more time with them. I love to do it because I know that we're on the same page. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think that process of being able to educate a client so that you are not only helping them, with the money side of their equation, but transforming who they show up as in the world. So for example, in my business, the way that I look at this is, there's a lot of places you can go for legal support out there in the world. And if you're an entrepreneur, you know, you've got some options. Some are going to be more expensive than others, but what's missing in the marketplace is the ability to support entrepreneurs in a way that effectively deliver the legal tools that they need and transform them as a leader of their own business. So in your instance, right, whether it's somebody leading their own business or leading their own life, you know, and needing to make financial decisions that are congruent with what they want to create, I think anytime we have the chance to transform somebody, the work is more meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that to continue down that road, my favorite people to work with are people that have a base level of introspection that I think is above the average person. You know, if sometimes like every time I go into a first meeting with somebody, I ask, what is important about working with an advisor to you, or something along that lines, to kind of get basically like, why are you here? Right. And I don't say it like that because that sounds rude, but why are you here? And the first answer is always, what do you think? I mean, really, what do you think, Heather?
Oh, the first answer of why they're
Why
there?
you would go see an advisor? Yeah.
Well, they've got a problem, or I mean, I don't know, they need help.
Well, it's usually, I want to get better returns, or, you know, I want to,
Oh, just
it's really,
specific
really
to the
surface
money.
level.
Yep,
Yeah.
specific to the
It's,
money.
it's specific to, there's a dollar sign in that answer somewhere.
Mm,
And so when I go through the follow-up questions to understand, okay, but what's important about that? What's important about that? And I usually have to go through that 10 times
right,
to say,
layer
okay,
after
you gave me an
layer.
answer, you gave me an answer, but that's not a real answer because there's no value in that answer. I want to get better returns. Okay, what's important about getting better returns? So I have a bigger portfolio. What's important about getting a bigger portfolio? So I have more money to spend. Okay, what's important about having more money to spend though?
Mhm.
Well, so I don't have to worry. Okay, we're getting close. What's important about not having to worry? Well, then my wife doesn't have to worry. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And now if your wife doesn't have to worry, what's the significance of that? Well, then I'll have a better relationship with her, and I'll probably get to spend more time with her doing the things that we love doing, because my family is the most important thing. Whoa, okay, but all you told me was you wanted to get 8% next year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Right.
now some people, I can go through that exercise with them, and they will never arrive at the point where they're willing to tell me what's really actually important to them.
Yeah. Well,
Some
and
people will never get there.
I believe it. And I think that's part of why the money conversation is so hard in our society. I think we have a lot of shame around our relationship to and our habits with money. We end up inheriting a lot of patterns from our parents and our
Good
upbringing,
and bad. Yep.
good and bad, right? There's just a lot that happens with money, and we're also judged on the outside by how much money
Yes.
we do or don't have, right? There's a lot of shame and judgment that goes on with these conversations about money, and we do a lot of judging ourselves in the same regard. You know, probably how many times have you heard, depending on when people intersect your path, like, oh, I should be farther along than I am now. I thought I
Mm-hmm.
would,
Oh, yeah.
I thought I would have more saved by this stage, or I thought. And I think the end of the day, the reality is that our money reflects it is one of the ways that we express our values, right? And which is why
It's
that
a tool.
conversation, it's a tool, but it is one of the ways that we express our values in the world, because if we value something, we will spend our money on it,
Mm-hmm.
or we won't, right? Depending on what it is. But it's also what makes that conversation really hard in a
Yes.
marriage, in a
Yes.
family, right? People value different things. They have different expressions. They have different ways that they express those values in the world, including by using their money. So I'm curious, because I know you do some, talking about values-based decision making and values-based planning. Do you want to share with us some of your insights around that topic?
Yes. This is one of my most passionate topics when it comes to the work that I do, because investing is, yeah, it's interesting. Yes, I love it. Okay, obviously I'm good at it. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But getting to understand a client's values and having the actions that they take with their money align with those values is the biggest and most rewarding thing that I get to do. It's so much more rewarding than getting somebody X% a year in their portfolio. So exactly what you said, Heather, is what I've learned by doing this, being in this industry, is that the choices that we make with our money are a reflection of our values. They are a reflection. What you buy, down to the Starbucks latte that you got this morning, is a reflection of something that you value. Maybe you value experiences. You spend a lot of money going on vacations and having really great Saturday nights, but you eat ramen noodles, every other night to be able to do that. Maybe you value security, so you sock all your money away and you don't do anything fun. Okay, whatever. There's no right or wrong there. So what I do with clients is when they come in the second meeting, once we've agreed to work together, is I have them go through an exercise where we identify their top 5 core values. And I like to do it if it's a couple, if it's a married couple, I like to do it for both spouses. And have your individual values. Don't try to come up with a family values, which that can be really good, but usually I'm going to have both of you in here when we're making decisions, and I need all of us to know that, Bob values this and Mark values this, right? I need us to all be on the same page, that there's a disconnect so we can compromise. Because I can't sit here and get you guys, I can't play mediator. I have to let you make a decision. Anyway, so I have them identify their top 5. And what we do is we make sure that all of the, number one, the goals that we're setting line up with those values, that's the easy part. Because nobody comes to me, Heather, and wants to set a goal that's in conflict with their values.
Right.
No, it just doesn't happen. Security and stability are really important to me, but I'm going to go, I want to pull out all my money from my 401k and go sail around the world for a year.
Right.
That doesn't happen. So the goals need to be aligned to the values, but the actions need to be lined up to both the goals and the values. And that's where people get tripped up, right? So I've got to identify the values first. What I share with people is that we've got an ideal version of who we want to be, right? You have some version of who you want to be, Heather. I have some version of who I want to be too. And when I think of that version of myself, that Sanger is eating a certain way and exercising a certain way and spending his money a certain way and dresses a certain way. He's doing all these things that are just better than what I'm doing now, right? The reason it's better is because I don't live up to my values every single day. And that ideal version of me would. Now, the only way I have a chance to get to become that ideal version of myself is to first identify those values so I can live up to them. So identify them. Then every time I have a decision point, I'm reflecting on those values. So every time I meet with clients, I pull up those values before we even start the meeting. And I say, look, these are your top 5. Remember that, Heather, you picked this. Now, I don't need you to do anything with this information right now at this moment, but we're going to probably make a decision today. And so now that's in your brain. It's in my brain. And if that decision becomes tough to make, we're going to come back and reflect on these and make sure that it lines up with one of the 5 values that you said was important to you, not that I said was important. Because a lot of people look to me as an advisor and they want, not everybody, a small fraction, want a decision to come from me. Right. Well, I can't do that, especially with a married couple that disagrees. Well, should we buy this house or this house? What do you think, Sanger? Well, I don't know. You can do either one, right? It doesn't matter. It's about what is important to you. Is security important to you, or is experiences important to you? The cool things you're going to get to do in the backyard of this bigger house that's harder to afford? Or is the security and stability important to you? In this house, you're not going to have very cool experiences, but you're going to have security and stability.
Right. Yeah. And I think I think you're right that the action part, because I think people, when they dig down, like they know what they value, but it doesn't always translate into our behaviors, into our decision making. I think we have different pressure points in our life that can lead us to make decisions that are not always consistent with what should be our true path. I'm curious what you see in the financial world, because I really like this, going inward to make decisions that are consistent with where we'd like to be. What kinds of advice do you see being given in the financial world that you feel like is just wrong advice? That maybe you see a lot of, or that you have has been around for a while and that people tend to follow without thinking about it?
Um, okay, that's a good question. So I see this particularly for younger people, right? For your Gen X and millennials who have been told that the reputation, the stereotype is, they're lazy, they don't have anything going for them, they're just leeches on society. And all of those negative comments come from the generation that raised them, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's the stereotype. The financial advice that is given to them, there's a lot, but there's a couple big ones. So one is avoid all debt.
Mm-hmm.
Avoid all debt. Get rid of your debt. Get rid of it as quickly as possible. Well, okay, in theory, yes. Yes, I don't want you to show up into my office with 80 grand in credit card debt. We're not going to be able to do a whole lot for you, right? With that 29% interest rate you've got going, you're in a hole, okay? Yes. But people take that to the extreme and say zero debt.
Right.
I should have zero debt. Okay, well, interest rates are at all-time lows right now. So if you are going to finance your car at 3% interest or withdraw your money from your investment account that was probably making 8 plus, that's a silly decision. So what I say instead is you should be able to not be in debt. You should be able to not be in debt. Now that's totally different than you should have zero debt.
Right. Because
So
it may at some point be a wise decision to leverage a little debt if it helps you meet your end goal.
yes. So Heather, I had a client come to me probably a year ago, maybe less than a year, said, "Hey, we are going to remodel our home," and they did a great thing by asking me. I'm not shaming them for asking me, but this is the mindset is, "Hey, we're remodeling our home. Should we take a loan out or should we just pay for it with our investments?" I said, "Well, what's the interest rate?" 1.9. Well, okay, let's look at what your investments have done over the past 15 years. And what do you think? Do you think we can beat 1.9? That's a pretty low bar. So what I share with people is when you're making a purchase outside of your primary residence, that's the only real exception. Outside of your primary residence, you should be able to pay cash for that. You should be able to pay cash for that car. You should be able to pay cash for that second home. But that doesn't mean you should. It doesn't mean you should, especially if you're a business owner. Business owners know that, right? Business owners know that. But you can carry that over to some extent in your personal life. And I know that goes counter to what very successful financial talking heads say, Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman. Okay, the important thing to remember is that their audience, right? If you're sitting here listening to this podcast, you're probably not in Dave Ramsey's audience.
Yeah.
Okay. He is speaking to a different crowd. He's speaking to people. God bless him. He found a way to make money serving people that don't have money. Like, it's amazing. Not taking anything away from him, but he has to take a hard line because what he's doing is speaking to people that are in the hole. They're
They
in
have
trouble.
right. They have to get out of the hole first.
Yeah, they had a behavioral problem that got them to where they are. And so he has to go, hey man, no.
Hard
It's like
line.
talking to,
That snowball, right? Get out of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. And it helps people. And the
Mhm.
people that abide by it, it changes their life. But it'd be like taking all of your nutrition advice from what's her face on The Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
I forgot her name. You
Jillian.
know who I'm talking,
Jillian.
Jillian Michaels,
Mm.
who says, no junk food, none. Well, okay, you can have some,
Right.
but
Well,
if you were 400 pounds last year, you probably shouldn't.
yes. No, and I love that. I mean, actually, that nutrition example is a great example. There's a guy that I follow named Jade, and I'm not sure how to say his last name, Teta or Tita. It's Teta, but he lives in the nutrition health world, knows a ton about women's hormones and weight loss and all of this stuff. And he goes against so much of the mainstream advice about these hardcore rules. And he said, look, for some people, having 300 calories of junk food in a day is not going to blow their diet, and it will actually help them stay on track the rest of the time, right? And I
Yes.
think some of that can carry over into our financial life. If we're able to occasionally have a meal out or enjoy a coffee or do something that makes our life enjoyable, we may be more likely to stick to our otherwise what may seem like hard savings and spending rules, right? Rather than a budget,
Yes.
right? And so I think it is that balance of like, how do you enjoy life and do it in a way that meets your goals, which may require some restriction or behavioral change or whatever.
Sure. Sure. And as long as as long as we're limiting the impulsive nature of those transactions, those decisions, right? Because impulse and really in any emotion can derail that,
Yeah.
right? Because we can have great goals and be on track for those goals and we've identified our values, but then an emotion comes in and it can be big or small, right? It could be going out to dinner and getting an appetizer. Oh, I'm really excited, having a good night. Okay, that $15 is not going to kill you. That's not going to derail your financial plan. You're not going to have to retire later because you got some fried okra. But when it's a house,
Mm-mm.
how yes, excitement can derail you. It's excitement. It's harder to recognize because it's a positive emotion. It's really easy for people to recognize fear or anxiety, something like a negative emotion and go, oh, maybe my anger is causing me to make decisions. I say easy relatively compared to excitement, right? But any emotion that comes in requires me to then reflect purposefully, consciously upon my values and go, okay, regardless of whether or not I'm excited, afraid, happy, sad, mad, whatever it is, can I justify this decision against my values and my goals? Can I justify buying this house against a goal that I have? Is it here? Okay, yes, it was to buy a house. Okay, what about my values? What about my values? Is it in there? And if you can't, then you know the answer.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it's a much like the layers of decision making, right? The layers of looking at goals and values, like it becomes a much more finely tuned picture than if you're just making decisions on the surface based on rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no rules. I mean, there really aren't very many rules that you have to follow in the financial world.
But you hear a lot of them, right? Even like we were just talking about, you hear a lot of rules where it's like, oh, well, if I just do this, I'm going to be okay, right? But it's really about creating that picture that works for you, that is multi-layered, that sets you up for success, but allows you the freedom to still do what it is that,
Exactly.
yeah.
And the reason that you hear rules are because though that information is coming regardless of who it's from, Dave Ramsey or some article you found on Yahoo, that is directed at a mass audience.
Mm.
So the only real way to get my information out there is to set a rule. Oh, no debt. Don't have debt. You know, and clients come to me with a lot of rules embedded in them. Well, I've got to have, and wherever they get it from, I've got to have this percentage of bonds because I'm going to retire. Well, I can only pull this percentage of my portfolio. Well, okay, but who was that rule for? You're 50. That rule is for 70-year-olds. So that's not going to work. It's not the same thing. So there's so many rules that just don't work because you're an individual. So all of my clients are individuals. There is nothing that I can do for one client that's going to exactly work for any other client, because all of my clients have their unique values, but even they also have their unique goals. So it's not just about the goal, because then I could say, oh, well, if you want to buy a house in 10 years for $500,000, you got to do da 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 da. Well, no. Oh, you have debt, you should pay it off. Well, I mean, yeah, probably a good idea, but there's some nuance here.
Right.
There's some nuance here.
It sounds like you really love actually living in that nuance.
I love it. I love it. If I wasn't an advisor, I would want to be an artist, and the artistry of being an advisor is what's exciting. Yeah. And that sounds weird. You don't hear that very often. It's like, yes, I don't like rules.
Yeah, but I totally get what you're saying. It's like a combination of a life coach involved in your money picture, right? Because you are digging into things that are at the forefront of people's lives and minds, and and deeply held in their hearts, whether or not they acknowledge it, right? They may start with the number story, like, oh, I need to be making X per year. But there's something underneath that.
Sure. And most people do start with that, right? Mm-hmm. Most people start with the numbers. Most people, and that's just because of what's available in the industry. Most people come, and I'll be really, really clear, not 100% of my clients allow me to engage them this way.
Right.
There are some that just don't. It's okay, fine. Hey man, I'll do the advice. I'll do exactly what you expect an advisor to do. Fine. You're not going to let me in. I can't make you. That's okay. The clients that do, they get the most out of it.
Yeah.
They get the most out of it. So I met with a client just a couple of weeks ago who is one of my favorite clients to work with. He has so much money that I told him, I showed him this. I was like, you could lose $1 million. You could flush it down the drain. You could put the rest of your money in cash and get 0%. You could lose money to inflation every single year. And everything that you're telling me that you want to do, you will be able to do it, because that's just your situation. Yet he still wasn't doing anything. He still was not spending this money, right? And so I said, my goal for you is not to get you to spend this money for no good reason, right? But my goal is to get you to live a fulfilled life with this money that you have.
That's right.
So how can we do that? So I reflected on his values, right? And I said, well, one of your values is relationships. Now you're a single man living in a small town of 200 people. You have the money to buy relationships. And he goes, what the heck are you talking about? And I said, you can buy your way into connection with people. I'm not saying you have to move, because he goes, I don't want to move. I like it. You don't have to. You don't have to. But you could buy a second home in a city. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, look, I told you could lose $1 million. Why don't you put that towards, anything that would allow you to go into somewhere where there's people? And he goes, oh, so I could buy like an escape loft. And so we called it the escape loft. And so we started talking about it. I'm like, yeah, you can. Where do you want to go? Because you can pay to fly there once a month. And he goes, I can. And I show him. But my point with that is, now this guy's talking to real estate agents, looking at, condos and houses in cities across the country, to just say, where can I go and meet people? Mm-hmm. And he's still going to live in his tiny town, and he's still going to have the same lifestyle that he had. But now his eyes lit up. Like, I can't tell you, that one conversation was so exciting and fulfilling to me, because I got to see this guy recognize, oh, I am going to actually enjoy my life more with
Right.
this money.
Right. Well, and this is where the power of an advisor to help show us the map. Like if we don't have the skills or the way to look at that ourselves, I think it's just so powerful the way that you can support somebody's life and actually change the decisions that they're making right now that actually create, greater alignment for them and what they really want. And I know we could probably talk all day just about like the money and the finances. I want the audience to get to know you a little bit better on the personal side. Like I know you are a hiker and you're into martial arts and you have these other interesting topics that you have found a way to tie into the conversations and the stories that you tell about money. Do you
Sure.
want to share with us a little bit about that?
I I I treat, and I think you're going to resonate with this. Like if you really love your job, you love your career, it doesn't end. You carry that hat with you everywhere you go, right? And so I tell the younger advisors on my team, I'm like, guys, you have to be an advisor everywhere you go. And if you don't want to be an advisor every single where you go, every step you take, just you need to accept your fate. And that's a different type of lifestyle, right? So I have learned so many lessons from applying my values in the same way that I coach clients to make decisions with their money that are based on their values. I make decisions about my money, of course, based on my values, but my life. So one of my values is challenges. Now that's not a value that everybody has. That's okay. That's not a value that everybody has. So for me, it's challenges. So I specifically seek out things I think are hard. Right. One is jujitsu. Jujitsu is the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. If you don't know what jujitsu is, it's involuntary yoga, right? With two people. So one, you go into a padded room with your psychotic friends, you slap hands, and then you try to strangle each other and break each other's arms. And you get right to the point of devastating damage, and then you tap out and reset and do it all over again. And we show up every day and we do that for fun. So I learned through jujitsu. I train under one of the best in the world. His name's Travis Luter in Fort Worth. I learned that so many lessons, but number one is you can get hurt if you're overconfident. You can get hurt if you're overconfident. So I had been training for a couple of years before I go train at Travis's, right? And I show up on that first day, and like I'm saying, I thought I was really good at this other gym. I would show up every day and I would smoke everybody at this other gym. So I go to Travis's gym and I think I'm going to be okay, right? And I'm training with all these guys about my same age, doing pretty well, feeling really, really good. And then after about 5-6 rounds, I don't know, something like that, I hear a voice call out from behind me and say, "Hey, you ready?" I kind of look over my shoulder and I saw this woman who, no disrespect, I mean, she's about my mom's age, right? And she weighs nothing, the wind would blow her over. And so I said, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And so I slap hands with her, and for the next 5 minutes straight, she embarrassed me beyond belief. I mean, she twisted me up like a pretzel. She was squeezing my neck until my face was turning purple. Now, I was trying with all of my strength, all of my technique, everything that I had, and I knew jujitsu at this point. I had been training for years. I'm telling you, I could not do anything. You remember seeing cartoons as a kid and you see people falling in quicksand?
Yeah.
How hard I try to run, I can't get out. This is how I felt. The entire time, this lady was having, and I kid you not, an entire conversation with someone who is sitting on a bench about her son's upcoming high school graduation party. The entire time she's smoking me. And so I realized, oh, if you're overconfident, you can really, really have physical pain as a consequence. Now that's true in a fight, right? I'm not going to go pick a fight. Now I won't pick a fight with anyone. I don't care if they're middle-aged women who have my side, right? I'm not underestimating anybody, but you can get hurt with your money by being overconfident. I don't really need advice. I'm good.
Right.
I can make these investing decisions on my own. I'm good. Hey, man, maybe.
Yeah. No, you see it. You see people who, are make decisions based on their life experience and companies that they like, and so they put a whole bunch of money into really specific investments, right? And they might do well for a time, but if they don't have an overall strategy that supports, consistent growth and consistent risk management, it's super easy in the financial world to get in over your head.
It's so easy. And in literally one question, if this can save one person from making a silly mistake, this would all be worth it. I have one question that has stopped so much of that, Heather. And that question is, I show someone, they say, well, I want to do this. And whether it's, I want to put, $500,000 into this, private equity deal that I found, or this, private company. I want to concentrate it all into this thing. And that's my whole life savings. I'm going to do this, just like you're saying. Okay. How sad would you be if it didn't work out?
Yeah.
How sad would you be if it all went to zero? And that simple question, well, I use the word sad. How sad would you be? Because you're going to be sad. You're not going to be disappointed. How sad would you be? Now, sometimes people say, not at all. Because they're in a place that they actually can do that.
Yeah.
That's usually not the people that I'm asking this of. But if I say, how sad would you be? They'd go, oh, I'd jump off a building. Oh, well, then what are we doing? Or they go, it would ruin Christmas. Yeah, okay, well, maybe we can tolerate that. There's a degree, but we need to really, 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 really understand the worst case scenario.
Right.
You need to have a crystal clear picture of worst case scenario. And if you are not okay with worst case scenario, I'm not saying you would accept it, but if you can't survive it, you really probably shouldn't do whatever you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have a similar question that I ask certain of my clients around like branding and protecting, the brand or company name or whatever it is that they're building. And, if you could no longer use that brand name or signature program or product or course name or whatever, and somebody else in the marketplace owned it.
Yeah.
Right?
How sad would you be?
Right. How sad would you be? Like, how frustrated would you feel? Because if the answer is that you're devastated, you need to do something about protecting it right now. Like, you need to line up
the money.
Yeah, you need to line up the intellectual property protection plan to make sure you take care of that, because the risks, they're there and they're real. And especially in the financial world, when people are making decisions that have a significant amount of impact, and they don't necessarily have the skills that it takes to be making that particular decision, right? Or the right context for the way to approach making that decision. So that's why we need people like you.
I think that's perfect. Sometimes it's great when somebody you can ask them that question and say, hey, how sad would you be? It's whatever.
Yeah,
okay,
right. They've got enough flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You got enough businesses, so if someone steals your branding, you're good to go.
You're good.
Okay, cool,
yeah.
Man, I'm glad you're killing it, but you need to be able to confidently say that.
Right. Well, and the alternate is if they don't care too much about it, like, well, I'm also like, what are you doing? What are you doing building a business or a brand where you don't care about, like, so it's kind of the flip side of that same coin, but it's a really important question. And I'm sure that there's a gazillion more where that came from when it comes to people's money and what's driving certain decisions. I feel like this is probably the tip of the iceberg. For folks that are listening, where do you like to connect? Either online, or how do you connect with folks? For somebody that's like, you know what, I want to reach out. I want to learn more about Sanger and his business, his work, where do you recommend people go find you?
Sure. Well, my parents gave me the best marketing gift of all time, and that's a weird first name. So you can find me
You're
on
like, thank
anywhere.
you. Thank you, mom
Yeah,
and dad.
Sanger Smith, super easy to find. But clearforkwealth.com, that's my business. That's our website.
All right.
That's where you can find us.
Awesome. Well, and I'll share that link. Anything else? I know even before we went live, you chatted about some projects that are underway. If those are live and you want anything else for me to share with the audience, I'll plug those into the show notes. So folks, if you're listening, be sure to go visit Sanger, visit his links, get to know more about his business at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Sanger, it's been so nice to connect with you and hear about your approach to, the way that you advise your clients and things that you have them think about. I know there's a lot more there. Do you have any final thoughts for people that are still hanging with us and listening?
First of all, thank you again so much. This was a blast. I had so much fun. The one thing that I would leave everyone with is if you write your goals on your bathroom mirror, your values need to be right next to them. That's it. And see how that changes. See how that changes, because it'll have the same impact that the goals on that Post-it note did.
I love it. It's so, there's one thing that I'll add to that, because a lot of times, and I went through this, I just led a group of women through a daily course where we woke up every morning, we met on Zoom at 6 a.m. for an hour, and we did some really powerful work together. And this connection between goals and values, because I feel like the world really gets it wrong when they teach us how to write goals, right? And how to even create goals. And oftentimes when we're creating a goal, we're thinking about how we think we're going to feel when we accomplish that goal, right? So that's often what drives our goals, is it's that promise of like, oh, I'll feel so much more amazing about myself if I've lost 15 pounds, or I will know that I have arrived if I have $300,000 in my savings account, or whatever, right? It's how we think we're going to feel. That's often what is motivating our goals.
It's a big letdown most of the time.
Yes. This is the reality, is that then what happens when you get there is like, you've actually got the same old life you always had. You now just are 15 pounds lighter, or you've got 300K in the bank, and you still have the same problems.
Yes.
Right. And so it's really fun to have this conversation actually about values and goals, because one of the things I led these women through is a values exercise where we all got connected to our values and we had to write them out. But also, if we look at our values, like there's a feeling that is created by acknowledging and living from our values, right? And if we also acknowledge that we often do the wrong approach to our goal setting, and instead think about how you want to feel and make choices in alignment with that feeling right now, today, not put it off as some future event. Right?
Yes.
And our values help us keep alignment with that. Anyways, I just love so much what you have to say about connecting goals and values.
That's how we find fulfillment, right? And the flip side of that is you may have, and I think this is what you're getting at, you're going to have, like I said earlier, rarely will you see a goal that's in conflict to your values. That just doesn't happen. But what happens so much is values that don't have any goals. You have this value, but you have no goal for it. You're not doing anything. So you didn't just set a goal to have a goal, right? But you have a value that needs a goal, and it needs a goal. Why? So that you can take action that's fulfilling it. So for me, that was about a month ago. I was just at this point where I knew I felt stuck. I was like, in my personal life, like, hey man, I'm not loving it as much as I should be. I got everything going for me, got a great family, making good money. I love my job. Why am I not loving my life? And my friends are great. Everything's awesome, but I just didn't feel good. And so I reflected on my values. I said, oh, well, I don't have a challenging goal. There's no challenging goal for me. So I said, well, I'm going to do an Ironman. And so I set that goal. And literally the moment I set the goal, I was just so much happier. I had to tell everyone, I'm just feeling so good. I'm so happy. And I started waking up and I started running and biking and swimming and doing all the things. Now, I have not run the Ironman yet. And the fact that I still have to run an Ironman is dreadful, right? That's awful. I'm not actually looking forward to it. But having the goal and knowing, oh, I have a challenge now is every single day I've got that. And it just brings me so much fulfillment.
No, I love that. Well, I think it's a great place to end on, especially now as we're hunkered down. We're still going to be in COVID. I mean, we're recording this in the midst of COVID and spikes around the country, but we'll still be there in a few months. And I think reconnecting to our values, especially when times are hard, is just so critical now more than ever. Sanger, so
For
great to
sure.
connect with you. I appreciate the work you're doing. So glad to have you on the podcast. Big thank you. I hope that I hope you'll keep me in touch. I hope you'll be in touch when some of your projects are coming to
Oh, I'll let
fulfillment.
you
I'm
know, for
excited to
sure.
hear about that.
For sure.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.